Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ancient Warfare Podcast. My name is Jasper and I'm the editor of the magazine. With me are Murray Dom, Myke Cole, which is not strange, and Michael Livingston, which is unusual. And in this case, Myke is not here as a member of the podcast team, but as a guest together with Michael. I'm going to try and keep doing that so that we know who's talking and who we're asking questions of. And they're here as guests because they have just written a book that isn't out yet, but we got a copy from Osprey to look at. It's called The Killing Ground, and it is a biography of Thermopylae with 20, did I see that right? 27 different battles or actions at that one site in Greece through the ages. So it's going to be ancient warfare and then a lot of not ancient warfare, although I don't know.
There is a fair bit of ancient warfare in
maybe
there.
Still ancient, so we don't have to be ashamed that it's the Ancient Warfare Podcast. But maybe we should start. How why would you why would you stop at not just stop at the first one?
I think when Michael and I were actually discussing the idea and solidifying it, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong here, that was one of the things like. Michael really had some brilliant insight into how the battle could be reinterpreted and where all of the major sources had gone wrong on it, and really had said, we could just do 480 BC, and who knows, maybe one of these days we should. But I really was kind of hard over on because I think the only book that comes close to this is Gates of Fire, right, which does 8 or maybe 13 total of the combat actions, some smaller number in greater depth, the ones for which there are greater sources. And I really wanted to, we really wanted to try to be as comprehensive as possible, and see what we could cover with it. Of course, this does raise a lot of challenges because in a lot of these instances, the source material is pretty light.
What's the first? Because 480 isn't even the first, is it?
No, there's one before that. We got no idea what the hell the date is. So we're just like, before that. Pre, yeah. Because Herodotus talks about there being a previous engagement there. But he doesn't give us anything to triangulate it much better than that. But yeah, Myke pretty much that's how it happened. I mean, Myke gets this harebrained idea. I mean, what can we say? He says, "Hey, let's do all the stuff on Thermopylae," because he's like, "There's so many." I knew of a few, but he's like starts just like, "Oh, this and this and this and this." Like, we should do a book. My expertise is more medieval, and so this also seemed like a good kind of synergy, of our two fields, and two expertises. But yeah, when we got into 480, it was like, should this just be the book? Like, because we're getting into this pretty hot and heavy. But yeah, in the end, we did them all. And all the way to World War II.
I wanted to go back just because there's one expertise that Myke is not mentioning that he has. And that I think he's, look, I spent a lot of time praising Myke. Anyone who listens to interviews that I'm on, Myke isn't just a medievalist. He's a geographer, right? And I don't think he talks about this enough in interviews. And it's something that I wish we draw more attention to, is that Myke comes from a family of geographers. His father was in the National Geologic Survey, and he grew up making maps. And I wasn't even thinking of that when we were talking about this idea. He was mentoring me through writing Legion versus Phalanx, right? So Myke and I formed a relationship as fantasy writers. And I'm sort of painfully aware of my status as an autodidact. I take a lot of pride in my work. I'm not trying to put myself down. I do good work. But you really can't compare someone who's working on something for 3 to 5 years to someone who's dedicated their life full time to being a scholar. Scholarship is a profession. And Myke was like, look, let me work with you here and let me walk you through this. And, we can talk about source vetting and objectivity. And he sort of was very generous with his time, as was Kelly DeVries, who I think some of you know. But this book is about a place, and a place is terrain and geography. And that is really something that is central to Myke's whole, not just his career, but his personal life outside of this. And I had no idea of that when I was kicking this harebrained idea with him around with him. And that absolutely transformed the book. And it really transformed our treatment of 480 BC, which takes up, I think, like a fifth of the book, or maybe even more, most of the book. And there perhaps someday is room for something more focused on just 480.
That was much better that Myke said that about you, Michael, than that if you said that about yourself.
I mean, I'll just say it's true. I mean, it's true. Yeah, no, that's very kind of you, Myke. Yeah, when you're approaching this, if anybody's read any of my books, I'm like, a battle is its ground. This is like my thing. And so yeah, when it came to here, it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, we got to know the ground. We got to know it inside and out. With geology, like what are the core sampling? We got to have everything we can get. I'll apply all my satellite stuff, all that jazz. But also, look, we don't have a choice. We have to go to Greece. Like we're going to have to do that. And you know how painful that is to go to.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, I mean. for research, and if anybody from the IRS is listening, that's the reason we went to Greece, and that's the reason it was tax deductible.
What other not to offend anyone, but what other reason is there? Walk battlefields.
All of that wine and delicious food we drank. Look, we had to survive on the trail.
And it's research. Like it's important to know what the olives taste like.
Retsina and olives, absolutely. How did they live? How did they fight? So the interesting thing, challenging, looking at the battlefield today, where the coastline has changed, the road has cut through some of the geography. How difficult is it to, and even the exact locations? Is the wall? Is the hill? How does that sort of walking the ground make sense of what you're reading?
When you're doing this, Mike's very familiar with my process. I go into anything like this with a targeting package, basically, right? We've gathered together every source we can in original and in translation, because sometimes you find out the translation's screwy. But we've got all the material we can gather, and we've kind of codified it, arranged it, got it into kind of an order that we can deal with. All the satellite recon we can. What we have for archaeology, all that kind of stuff. And then you get on the ground and kind of informed by all that, start walking the ground. And look, it's not like, lightning strikes, right? But when you're on the ground, it's, that's why that detail is the way it is, right? You couldn't see that in satellite or whatever, right? You could see it on the ground. When we were looking at the wall, I think there was this kind of like, oh my God, that's the reason the wall is arranged the way everybody's misunderstood how this wall is functioning on the landscape, because they don't understand. It looks like they don't understand much about how fortifications function, but like we're just like standing there and be like, oh shoot, that's what's going on. Because on the landscape, knowing how this would have be constricted by the water, that explains why the wall faces the way it does, because that's where the road is, and that establishes where the road is, and you sort of like piece by piece put this together, and are always double checking with every source you've got, right, to find out, does this match what Herodotus tells us? Does it match, Diodorus Siculus, whoever it is we're looking at? Does it match up? So it's it's kind of a slow process. I'm running drones. I'm sending Myke to do any hikes that look difficult, because.
So Myke did the Anapia path and you didn't, or you.
No, we did. Well, we did as much of it. Okay. We did as much of it as we could. The really difficult time where we got trapped by darkness and snow. Yes, there was snow. Was trying to find Lake Nevropolis, which is on the top of Mount Calidromo. Is a really beautiful lake that's up there. One thing I do want to add to what Myke said about the targeting package is, of course, we reckoned the secondary scholarship before we went. Right. That's when he talks about a targeting package, we're basically digesting everything we possibly can, so that we hit the ground knowing what there is to know, so that we have a basis to make that interpretation. And and based on that, Myke arrived with the knowledge of the Transisthmian corridor, which isn't an Aedes-Calidromo route, right? So the story of 480 is the story of an east-west route along the Malian Gulf that apparently goes through the Phocian wall. And this is what Myke is talking about when he says the wall doesn't face the right way, right? Because that's not how the wall is. The wall's like this.
People can't see that on the podcast.
Yeah, it parallels the wall parallels the road.
Sorry, I'll say it this way. So people say the wall is north-south cutting the road, and it isn't. It's east, sort of east, northeast, northwest, whatever, northwest, southeast, paralleling the road. And that doesn't make any sense with the popular narrative. And what was so shocking to me is that when you look at the museum video in the Thermopylae Visitor Center, they show Spiridon Marinatos, that's the Greek famous Greek archaeologist who excavated it, his accurate positioning of the wall. And then there's a video which tells the story of Thermopylae with the 300 story of it going like, so the museum is contradicting itself, which was just incredibly shocking. But the point is that if Myke had not uncovered this certainly public, but very little known idea of this Transisthmian corridor, this is a north-south route that goes through the Dema Gap west of the West Gate, none of it would have made sense. So once we're standing on the ground, this is why I'm talking about the targeting package in the process. So we have this idea of the Transisthmian corridor. What is that? What is this gap over here? And then we get on the ground and we see it. And we're like, oh my God, what people think happened here is not what happened here. And what people think Leonidas's plan was is not what Leonidas's plan was.
It's such a fascinating battlefield because, the 481 has been dissected and there's still more dissection that needs to happen to it. And yet when you then get the Gauls invading, is that the next one? 279, is that the next?
Oh, no, goodness, no. There's plenty more between, sorry, I should have this book open to the table of contents because even I can't keep track of it. 480, 355, 352, 346. The third battle is in 323, which is, I think, in the Lemnian War. And then 316. So the Gauls in 279, that's the ninth action in the past. That we know of, Murray. That we know of. Remember, one of the things that Myke and I tried to be really frank about in this whole thing is the limits of having to shrug and say we don't know at times.
It's nice that the first one is a known unknown.
We don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So that it sets it up. Yeah, it sets up like you don't know how many were actions, big and smaller actions. My question is, how does studying all the other actions help you? How does that inform? Does that inform how people fight there, or is it often the detail just too lacking that you just can't do that, and you tend to focus on that second one?
Well, each battle you have to reconstruct the landscape because it's kind of said at the top, this is changing so radically, right? The coastline is moving miles.
Do you have an idea of when that happens?
Yes. Yeah, we have through geologic coring, we can sort of see the advance of that. Like, so I got this nice color map that I put in the book that shows the coastline at 3 or 4 spots to show how that advance is going through time. And obviously it's not totally linear, but pretty linear between those points, how the coastline is expanding as the Gulf is literally kind of silting up here. So yeah, each time you got to kind of figure that out, right? Figure out where the roads are, because the roads are moving accordingly. As there gets to be more flat plain, obviously the road tends to move out onto the flat plain where it can go straighter and be wider. And you're also dealing with, mountainous terrain that is changing to some degree. Changes in technology, right? Cars, when we get to the fights in the 40s, we're dealing with trains and cars and motorcycle units. This isn't anything at all like what they're dealing with in 480. But at the same time, roads are roads, transits are transits, passes are passes. And there is a kind of way that when you look kind of globally across it, you can see, that in this other battle, they're using the ED Pass. They're using this Transisthmian corridor that Myke's referred to. Why wouldn't they be accounting for it in another fight nearby, right? They're going to have to. It's clear that people are using both these routes. So why is it that when we're looking at certain battles like 480, everybody's ignoring one of the routes? Everybody would have known it was there. The Greeks would have known, the Persians would have known. So you can't just ignore it. We got to deal with it. And you see this just again and again through, all 27 actions, this awareness of both routes. And how do you deal with them, right? And we can see it on the landscape. They're both fortified, right? The attempts to fortify it have gone through the centuries because they know it's a problem.
So leaping ahead, how do the Huns not make it? Oh,
well, Murray, before we leap ahead, let me tack something onto Myke's answer. He gave a geographical answer to your question, Jasper, of how studying one battle informed another. Let me give you another example. I had bought the general, so for example, the Phocians holding the Anopeia Path, right? This is a famous thing. You look at the Shepherd Osprey campaign book at the Jack, I think it's the Noon illustration in there. Forgive me if I named the wrong artist. They're hoplites, right? That are holding this pass. And that's the general vulgato, the term that Myke came up with for accepted narrative of how it went. But when we looked at the Third Sacred War, we noticed that the Phocians, they only ever put Silhouette on Calidromo. And when we started analyzing that, we're looking at the terrain and we're thinking, this is not a place for hoplites to fight. And when we got on there and spent, days just walking back and forth across that, I was like, man, unless this has changed dramatically in 2,500 years. And again, here's where Myke's background in geography came up. Look, it's a very geographically
Myke is shaking his head for,
very geographically active zone, but that's still 2,500 years, a blink of an eye for this stuff. There is just no place to put a phalanx. There is no place I'd put a hoplite. And so, look, that's a significant update for military history nerds for sure. And it also changes the story of how the battles fought. Troop types tactically impact the battlefield, and we rewrote it. We were like, these were not hoplites. They would not have put hoplites on here. That does not make sense. And we had to work backwards from that, right? Because that was something that really came home from the source material that was available on the Third Sacred War.
So that the Phocians stepping aside and allowing the Persians to pass is changed because they're not able to fight.
Outshot. Javelin armed against some of the greatest archers with powerful composite bows. And a lot of this also connects to what we believe was Leonidas's backup plan. But again, so this is one of the other things that Myke's, and again, I'm sorry if this is the Myke Livingston fan show, but the stuff that matters to me is Myke is a satellite imagery person. So we're spending tons of time poring over the top of Calidromo, looking at these fortifications that you can see from Google Earth today. And you got to remember that with fortifications, it's sometimes really difficult to date them. What are you doing? You're basically looking at construction of size of stone. You're not going to carbon date these things. So in a lot of cases, we had to admit we weren't perfectly sure, but we could see what looked like fallback positions, right? Where these Silhouette were planning to hold the line from elevated ground. And it really became clear from the landscape that that was what was supposed to happen. And obviously from Herodotus' narrative and other Diodorus Siculus, it didn't happen. So the question became why it didn't happen. And when you look at the tactical interplay from how Phocian and Silhouette are armed in that period versus the Persian immortals, you realize, they didn't have time to get back there. They got shot down before that happened. And that played into the story. But the thing I want to highlight here is it is both the examination of multiple battles informing earlier ones and the looking at the geography in a really intimate way that someone with Myke's skill set can, and the nerdy minutia of arms and equipment that all of us at Ancient Warfare Magazine are obsessed with. When you lock all that together, all of a sudden, what looks like a mystery starts making complete sense. It almost seemed like there was no other answer to how things had played out.
Yeah, and this really, was awesome because look, I don't know some of those minutiae, right? I know my minutiae, and put me in the 13th century, baby, I'm ready. And we'd be up there, looking at a certain battle, right? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they do this? And Myke's like, yeah, dude, they can't because they're wearing this and they're doing that's never going to work. I'm like, okay, well, what would work, Myke? Well, this kind of thing. All right, well, how can we make that work, right? So you have this synergy, of two people who know their stuff, but also this synergy across the battles, and it isn't just unidirectional, right? Because also by understanding what's happening in 480, you can move forward the other direction too and understand things. So it was, really only kind of like when you put it all on the board, against the landscape And I've got the map I put in there. I don't know if it's going to make any sense to anybody but me. We overlaid all of the history in one map and tried to color code it. Because literally that's how, that's how it is on my end, right?
Really is great. Watching this come together, and sort of getting the publisher on board with
Myke is showing it to us again, obviously, but it's an impressive map and something that, it's something that you go in modern age. Did you get him to put a QR code in there so you can look online and maybe that would be great if you could peel the layers.
That would be awesome.
But
if you've done drones, you could do a QR code video fly through.
We'll have to go back.
Street view of
we got to go back for that. I posted one of the drone shots that I did on the Kiwanis Hill. We have that one. It's actually a drone shot of I'm on the wall, the Phocian wall. I'm flying the drone over, and you actually see Myke climbing up to me, because poor Myke, he's such a good man. He had brought me my iPad because I'm up there with the drone and stuff, and I'm like, shoot, I need my iPad because it's got my satellite stuff. And he's a strong fella there. So he was like, I'll run back to the car. I got it, bro. And he cooks down to the car, comes back up with the iPad. I'm like, awesome, there's my iPad. I'm like, where's my Apple Pencil on the iPad? He's like, oh no, I lost it. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. And so yeah, you see like this drone footage, and he's actually kind of like coming up. He lost the pencil, and then
lost at Thermopylae. Absolutely.
Lost at Thermopylae, and then I don't know, 10 minutes later, we're just standing there. And he looks down at his feet. He goes, "Is this it?" He pulls it up out of the grass. Okay.
Did you say, Myke? Did you say, then I shall write in the shade? Because that's what you should have said.
Oh, come on. Missed opportunity.
Gotta go back.
A little more tragic because those Apple Pencils are like $300. So
yeah. That's a tragedy to lose on.
I do want to say this. Aside from even the fun of doing this historical work, for the listeners of this podcast who have not been to Thermopylae, it is some of the most dramatically beautiful physical geography I've ever seen in my life. And just to walk through the olive grove on the back saddle of Kallidromo and Lake Nevropolis, like we've described, and go over the hot springs where these folks in camper vans are bathing, and there's this blue-green algae that is making the water kind of teal reflective, and it's just, and then we're doing this and we are unlocking the story of what happened here in a way that feels almost revelatory. It was I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but it was an almost spiritual experience. It was an incredible trip. And one of the things I've been doing, because we're in the publicity phase of the book now, unsuccessfully so far, is I'm pitching travel magazines.
Hey, you're on the Ancient Warfare podcast.
Yeah,
that's true. No, I'm talking about travel only. I'm pitching travel magazines, and I'm trying to get National Geographic and Travel and Leisure and airline magazines to take this story and to get, because who goes to Thermopylae? Greek patriots and history nerds. But this really is a place that I'd love to see more people just go see, because it combines two amazing things in a destination, which is just incredible natural beauty and one of the most amazing stories ever told.
And good wine.
So few ancient battlefields where we know the real location, that you could be organize a tour and go to a whole number of them. But we've had plenty of articles in Ancient Warfare about where certain battlefields are, and mostly where they really aren't, or somewhere in this area. And you have one of them at least where you can pinpoint it almost. Or is it, as Murray was saying?
Yeah. Is it more interesting as a dramatic, geographically interesting battlefield with puzzles, as opposed to here is a gently sloping plain, or even a very flat plain where a battle was fought? Obviously Mantinea, even Leuctra and Plataea, there's geographical components to the battlefield. But one of the reasons, that Boeotia is called the Ares dancing floor, is that it's got the flattest sort of collection of plains. So therefore, it's flat, let's fight on it, which doesn't allow this kind of minutiae. And so it's sort of yes, here's the battlefield. And Leuctra, obviously, with the monument So like, well, there's the monument. And then it's a matter of, like with Marathon, what is the relationship between the battle and the monument? And does it tell us the line of the troops? Does it tell us where the troops broke? Does it tell us where the troops were buried?
Lutra is also bisected by a irrigation the channel, which ruins your ability, and a private farm, which ruins your ability to really access it. One thing I also wanted to mention, because Osprey, I don't want to blame Osprey for this. I didn't push them on it. We didn't get an acknowledgement section. And if we'd had that, I would have thanked Professor Konstantinos Vouvalidis from Aristotle University, who let me bend his ear for 3 hours and really downloaded to Myke and I the physical geography. He's a geologist, of that area. I think he's the only person who understands Central Greece. He's written 2 incredible articles that we cite in the book. So when we hit the ground, Myke and I understood, going back to Pangaea, right? Going back to the formation of the continents, exactly how every jot and tittle of the landscape had formed. And that really powerfully empowered us, not only to analyze that landscape, but to be moved by it.
And it is amazing, as you said, to go back to what you said there, Murray, so many of these are just flat. The dramaticness of this and the military engagements that have happened there are combined, right? It's the same thing. You can see where the German emplacements were. You can see that stuff in a way that you can't at a lot of places. But here it all is, and it's open air, right? Just there it is. Go check it out, right? And in some cases amazing. I mean, the Anthela, it's just incredible, sanctuary town that's right there that apparently every historian has ignored for reasons I still cannot fathom. Like you just walk to it. It's right there, man. And to have that interplay, it needs more people visiting it. It really is incredible.
It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Kalkriese, which we can debate whether that was the Teutoburg Forest or another battle from the Germanic campaigns, but it has, it's certainly not nearly as dramatic a landscape. I mean, it's just woods, but we know that there's a hill and there's wood and a swamp on the other side. So you get a narrows, and, that's the kind of stuff where stuff happens, and the archaeology bears it out. And it makes it interesting, probably more interesting to look at than indeed just a plane, where a plane can't tell you very much, especially since a plane tends to have been planed down some more over time.
Yeah. It's fascinating, though, because I think there are lots of articles and books that just accept the identification of a battlefield without walking the ground. And so you get this sort of succession of, well, this is where the battle was fought. And it's not until someone goes, but you can't fight that battle there, that this doesn't work.
So Murray, this was one of the great, look, Myke is a mentor to me, and this is one of the great moments of that mentorship, is when I was planning Legion versus Phalanx, indeed had some of the book outlined and written. I visited Myke in Charleston, South Carolina, and I laid out the whole book to him because he was a professor of history, and here I am, this autodidact, and I go, this is what I'm going to do, and he goes, this is great, Myke, I'm so excited, and I feel so validated because this scholar he's not telling me that I'm an idiot. And he goes, great. When are you going to go physically stand on the battlefields and map them and stand and see lines of sight and stuff? And I said, I'm not going to do that. I have Google Earth. Why would I do that? And you should have seen him. He goes, this is 2017. He goes, oh, and you can see like Myke's too nice to say anything. And he makes a dinner date between me and Kelly DeVries. Kelly DeVries, I think many of your listeners know him, but he's one of the great medieval warfare scholars of our age. And it's at this wonderful wine bar in Charleston where the two of them have gone for years. And we all go out. And Myke turns to Kelly and goes, we talked about Legion versus Phalanx, and Kelly is excited for me too, which makes me feel great. And Myke turns to Kelly and goes, Kelly, Myke is planning to write this book without going to visit any of the battlefields. What do you think of that? And Kelly, ponders his wine for a moment. He goes, well, I think that's really stupid. And the two of them, they lay into me. And by the end of the conversation, which lasted several hours, I'm like, okay, I'm going. But the really touching part of the whole thing, and I'll try to say this without getting choked up, was that at the end of it, I don't know, a month or a few weeks after I come home from that trip, where I'm still buzzing and I'm booking plane tickets and I'm trying to get ready to go to Greece, Myke keeps bugging me. When are you going? What are your dates? When are you going? And I emailed him or I called him or something, and I was like, God, why are you bothering me? Why do you need to know the specific dates of when I'm going to Greece? And he says, because I'm coming with you. And that was one of the kindest things anyone's ever done. And it was a great trip. And there was lots of wine drunk there.
I'm going to be quite nasty now, just to pull you down and to, bring it back to reality, because in brackets there is
finally
because brackets are, well, no, this is still in praise of Michael, but just, just basically in brackets, because I don't trust you to walk those battlefields and know what you're seeing. But that's what Mike was thinking.
No, but
I'm coming with you because you don't know. Because Angus and I did the same thing in North Allerton, which is the Battle of the Standard, or the Battle of North Allerton. And we wandered around this battlefield, which is, again, owned on a private farm, but we kind of walked around the edges of the private farm looking through the fences and things. And all of the accepted stories of that battle and the names, even to this day, Red Hill, Standard Hill, you're like, they're all, Scott's Pit Lane, where the bodies are supposedly buried. You're like, they're all in the wrong place in relation to one another if you want to make sense of the battle based on what we know from the written sources. So you have to change it. But it's one of those things that you just read accounts. Oh, this is how it happened. It can't happen that way, and it can't happen that way because there's a swamp there and there's a swamp there. There's only here to fight, and so it's one of those fascinating aspects of warfare, which obviously living in Australia, not like Jasper who's living on a battlefield, the Battle of Zutphen. But anyway, we can't do it.
Northwest Europe, everything is built though, just about.
Well, true.
Yeah, happens.
But the question then becomes, with so many successive battles, and obviously Philip II at Thermopylae and Athenians versus Thessalians and others.
And then Philip II from the Battle of Zutphen.
Yes. Nice, good one. We're talking 4th century BC, not 16th century AD. But then you've got the Gallic invasion, and they are able to emulate what happens in 480 BC, and probably is that we've got the most material in Pausanias on the Gallic invasion, probably. And then my one, because I did a bit on the Huns, and all you get with the Hunnic battle, and I think you did the one in 253 as well, got turned around. You're like, was no one talking to Attila? Was he not finding out that there's these two waves? Because, the Huns in the 5th century are unstoppable. And the thing that stops them is a pass that's never stopped anyone before. So it's this kind of like, how did you not find out that there's these ways through to Greece?
Well, one thing about that is, this goes back to something that Mike said earlier. These are the battles that we know of, the engagements that we know of, the military actions that we know of. Our assumption is that this pass has been assailed many more times, but it simply didn't make the news, as it were, because people turned back, right? Because it was held, and they're like, it's not worth it, man. I'm not getting through this thing, and so they turned back. Or in some cases, I think we said this in the last chapter, the epilogue kind of thing, conclusion. In some cases, they just never left home at all, right? Like kind of looked at the map and we're like, yeah, no, we're not even going to try, right? We're gonna not even play that game. So yeah, there are these occasions where it holds that we hear about, but yeah, we do hear about an awful lot it falling, somebody getting through, obviously including the most famous one at 480. It didn't hold, like it didn't work. But part of the reason that that's news at all is, I think, because most of the time it is functioning, right? It is holding.
So that I was going to say, so then that is the answer to the question. So why do they keep trying to hold an invasion force there if it apparently never works? So the answer is probably there's a lot more cases where it does work. We just don't know about it.
Yes. Well, so one of the things that Myke does really well in Crécy and Agincourt, and I think he introduces this in Never Greater Slaughter, which is his book on the Battle of Brunanburh, is he has certain rules of historiography for approaching battlefields. And I don't know if this is one of the rules, but it's certainly something he mentions, which is that battle is, even when you think you're going to win, even when the odds are stacked in your favor, is this incredibly chaotic and risky thing. And that really, really canny commanders avoid it a lot of the time, right? Because and there's plenty of examples of this, when the odds are stacked heavily in your favor, it can still blow up your campaign and lose things for you. So I think that what Myke is describing there is this deafening silence of how many times really canny commanders. And this is something we will never be able to answer until, I don't know, AI enables us to download the consciousness of every commander in history, is how many times people were like,
yeah, but AI can't walk the field. Can they, Mike?
Yet.
Well, they can with their robot. They can with their robot bodies. But where a commander is saying, you know what, we're gonna invade Italy. We're gonna stay here in the Black Sea. We're not even trying. And I think that's really, really critical.
Yeah. Well, I think both, Roel Konynendijk will be very proud to hear you say that about, war is a risky thing and we shouldn't do it unless we're certain. And as would Sun Tzu way back when, going, well, oh.
And but this is something that continues all the way through it, right? I mean, you mentioned Sun Tzu and all that, right? But what at this point, it was 2 hours ago, I was translating a document from the 14th century out of medieval Italian that is talking about the legates, the papal legates, trying to prevent the Battle of Poitiers from happening in 1356. And they're trying to describe, the legates are describing to the King of France, like, dude, you do not want to fight a battle here because battle is uncertain. And even though it looks like everything's in your favor, you don't know for certain what can happen. There's just too many variables in war and in battle. You just can't know. And it looks really good for you, but be careful. And of course, we get the Battle of Poitiers and the King of France, gets captured. It goes very, very poorly for him. So yeah, this is a recurring theme. And Jean II there at Poitiers is not foolish necessarily in what he's doing. He has the Black Prince very much like cornered. I totally get why he fought that battle. But yeah, despite everything going for him, it still went bad. He gets captured. History changes. So yeah, this is as Mike said, this idea of a canny commander doesn't foolishly go into fight. Pretty rarely, a good commander is more than willing to fight. If they got the advantages, right? This is what you're going to try and do. But otherwise, you don't fight just to fight. Despite what we get in movies or whatever. And so yeah, understanding that on this ground, as we're walking around, and you'd say, well, why would they not do X, Y, or Z or Z for those who pronounce it that way? I mean, why are they not doing that? Well, because they're not idiots. Like, they're not idiots. They're not going to do that. What would they do? What would a smart person do, right? Because they got all these advisors with them. They're going to usually be able to make what at least appears to be the right move. And that's again one of the things on a landscape when you're walking it, where line of sight, what you can actually see, because they don't have aerial recon, right? They don't got, well, when I'm walking around on my iPad, they're, I'm standing here, what can I see? How do I interpret that? What do I think I can do? Makes a world of difference, and things will fall into place in ways that are they're semi kind of magical or whatever. You're just like, oh, click, everything puts together. Spiritual, as Mike said there.
Yeah. So is there another battlefield that competes with Thermopylae 27?
Ooh. Oh, that's tough. That's caught me flat-footed. Mike, you might know of one from medieval warfare, but I can't think of one from ancient. And the part of this, Murray, and we put this in the conclusions as well, is that part of what makes Thermopylae so significant is its own story of that its own participants believed, even from its own legend reinforcing itself. That part of why people chose to fight at Thermopylae was also because it was a place that was sanctified for fighting, right? I mean, even if you're in fighting Attila in 447 AD, and we have a great example of this, is that we found poetry from I believe, a Australian prisoner of war who was serving in the British Army. He was a prisoner in Crete. And he writes about this conversation he has with one of his sergeants. He's an officer, where he's telling him about Leonidas. And he's evoking, the auditorium of the gods, when he's standing in Thermopylae. He's a British soldier. And it still means that to him, that he's fighting in this pass. So part of what makes Thermopylae significant is all of the things that Mike and I mentioned previously: the geography, the geology, it really is, and we say this throughout the book, some of the most uniquely defensible terrain on Earth, anywhere ever. And this is part of why it's continually used battle after battle, all the way up to 1942. Well, 1942 battle It's a sabotage action. But part of it also, and this is what makes it so incredibly significant, is its own legend, its own significance, what it means to the people fighting there, and what it means to the world. And for that, I cannot think of another battlefield. I don't know if you can, Myke.
Yeah, I mean, compared to it in what way, right? I mean, I'm into the Battle of Agincourt, because I just put out a book, reinterpreting that, and it's an amazing battlefield, but it's one battle, right? I mean, Thermopylae, just this layering, and as Myke said, the weight of the first of the, second as we count it, right? The 480 event. Makes all of those they're carrying that weight, and then they're adding to it, right? And then the next one carries that weight and adds to it. He mentioned this poet. We also have a postcard that appears to be from one of the Germans stationed there, who was stationed at the viaduct that gets blown up in 43, which is an insane story.
That's 1943, just in case anyone's thinking 43 AD.
Yeah, 1943. Yeah, that's what you said. I should say 1943, Second World War. These guys blowing up this viaduct. You have a postcard that appears to be like sent from there before it gets blown up. It's a picture of the viaduct, and on the back of the postcard, the person's written in German, talking about this is where Ephialtes came through to outflank Leonidas. I mean, they're aware. Everybody's aware, right? The actual event that Myke's referring to, where this poetry happens. That's when the Anzacs are trying to figure out where are we going to try and hold the line against the advancing Axis to give time for Greece to evacuate, for Athens to evacuate.
I had a student. He would have been in his late 80s at the time. He's since passed, but he was a gun crew of the Australian Army at Thermopylae.
Oh my gosh!
Amazing. I was talking to him about. I lecture his wife on opera. She's now 97. Still hosts our opera soiree, which is hilarious. But he was like, well, what's this Murray guy do? So I did Greek and Roman warfare, and he was just regaling stories of fighting in Greece and Crete, and you're like, wow. So jealous, but yet not jealous, because I've never seen.
No, you're not. Someone who's been to war, you're not jealous.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was going to throw things like Tapai in the Dacian campaigns. You get like at least 4 battles of Tapai, about which we know nothing. We
Megiddo maybe.
Megiddo,
at least as an earlier start.
Yeah, 1400 BC.
It'll have a final start too. Megiddo will.
Well.
What I keep going back to is what battlefield has this resonance. And I'll give 2 examples here, one early and one late. You spoke about Pausanias in 279 BC. And one of the things I point about, this is over 100 years after Thermopylae, the Battle of Thermopylae, which is not the Battle of Thermopylae. And Pausanias is very quick to point out that the Phocians defending the flank of the Greek position against the Gauls are doing so in the manner of the ancestors who did so against the Persians. Like the significance of that repetition means something to this guy a century later. Okay, fast forward to right now, me. I don't talk a lot about my day job. I'm a corporate executive, and I don't talk about it because it sounds like I want people to know about me. But I'll say this: I would not be surprised if any one of my colleagues, none of whom are classicists, were to go into to give a presentation or a briefing, a corporate briefing, mess it up, and then when we left, we would all joke that was their Thermopylae, and everyone would know what we meant. And that is what I'm talking about, to the point where.
Maybe Waterloo.
No, I was about to say, unfortunately, Ridley Scott's ruined. That was my Waterloo. It's like, well, did Waterloo, were there trenches? I'm sorry.
That's true.
Did Napoleon charge on a horse as an artillery officer?
But this is what I mean, though, is that the fact that it has that degree of currency, and I see you shaking your head, Jasper, but I disagree with you. I really
no, and I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that in that context, Waterloo might be more relevant if somebody screws it up. But the resonance on it, there's a handful of battles from history, and Thermopylae is certainly in that row. I was just going to ask one final question that goes more back to what you're doing in the book, and I was noticing that I think am I right in saying that most of the sources for the 27 actions, as far as they exist, that we have, are from the defender's point of view? I don't know, maybe for 1941, you can find German sources.
A
But
little
for
bit,
most of the older
most of
ones, I assume
defense.
it's the defender's point of view. If you've seen all those together, and you've been there, can you put yourself more in the mind of the attacker? What, again, the idea, I'm not going to attack that position. It is held. Let me find another way around, or.
Well, I at least from my standpoint, I would say that most of the time that we were on the field, I was putting myself in the position of the attacker, right? How am I going to get through this? Because the ways that you defend this landscape, once you suss them out, they're sussed out. Like that's how you defend this landscape. So there's not going to be a lot of question about what you're doing on the defense, what that prepared defense is going to be. It's a question of how you overcome that. How if you're going to try this, how do you think you can get through? Because neither route is super great, right? If you take the ED pass, that's got issues. You got to get through a thing called the Dama Gap. There's Castro Arias. There's defensible positions on that. If you go through the Thermopylae pass, which isn't really a pass, it's just a coastal road, you got defensible positions you got to bust through there. And then you have another sequence of passes that you got to go over that are actual mountain passes before you're into central Greece. So you got to approach this with a plan. And in most of these cases, when we're sort of looking at, a certain engagement, and you're thinking from those, the attacker's position, you're like, oh, well, this is how they're trying to do it, right? And again, usually it's informed by what has happened before, right? Well, we know that the last time some blokes tried to get through, it didn't work at all, and this is why it didn't work. So, all right, how can we get around that, right? It's this kind of like learning process as each one is informed by the other. And of course, I mean, on the defense side, they're informed too, right? Why are we going to hold here? Because this is where Leonidas held, blah 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 blah. Even though the terrain, of course, is changing dramatically over the centuries.
I mean, the other thing that there's a legacy of is the number 300, even though it's never exactly 300, but there's so many later sources that refer to 300s being like Leonidas, being like, Thermopylae, even though they often emphasize the victory. You're like, but hang on, you've got your history wrong, because that, but it's all as far,
just fascinated by the number 300. You go, look in the magazine and look at the blog.
So I want to tell one more story, if it's okay, just because I'm really enjoying the personal reminiscence here. I know it's a history podcast, but this is one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Myke mentions these other passes that you have to get across. The Clisur and the Fontana are two of them. I don't remember which one we were in, but we had just landed in Athens and drove up there on the first day because we were trying to conserve time. And we were both jet lagged and really tired. And we're photographing, I don't remember which pass. This is one of these passes that you'd had to go over after busting through Thermopylae. And this shepherd pulls up in a busted up Ford pickup truck about 20 feet down the road from us, maybe 50 feet, and gets out with a gun. And Myke and I look at each other. We don't say anything. And we're both thinking, well, I guess one of us is going to die and the other one's going to get him. And I'm not kidding. And we're like getting ready to charge this dude. He must have, and then he fires in the air. He was signaling, I guess, another shepherd down in was it Clisur or Fontana?
That was Fontana Pass, man. Yeah, good memory. That was Fontana Pass. Yeah, and we're like, is he going to shoot us? Like, what's going on? Like,
we're still jet lagged.
I should have learned Greek.
We thought we were going to have to fight. Well, between the two of us, we have some. He was a very nice man. We have another shepherd whose photo, Georgios, his photos in the book, who helped us when we were around, I think, Castro Arias. They're very nice. But in that moment, we thought we just arrived in Greece. One of us is going to get shot.
I'm the bigger target, man. I was like, I'm going to get shot. Myke, can you carry my body, man? Tell my wife I love her.
It was such a terrible.
There's a letter in my pocket. That's right.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was a fun trip. But yeah.
All right. Well, on that bombshell, I think the book is Killing Ground, a biography of Thermopylae.
And by the way, that's another that was a real stroke of genius on Mike's point. Was he really insisted on centering the past itself as the protagonist, which I think really worked out for the book. So.
Well, the authors are happy with the book. Now let's go and read it and see what you think.
We hope you're happy with it too.
Thank you very much, guys. See you next time.
Thanks so much.